Okay, so I think we'll get started. This is How the IRA Can Benefit Your University webinar. I am Caroline Fox. I head the SDSN USA network. We are one of 50 networks based out of the Global Sustainable Development Solutions Network. Sorry, today I learned we just welcomed 3 new more. So one of 53 networks, I'll correct myself. The US network is countrywide. We have members from across the nation joining us in pursuit of sustainable development. And we're so glad to welcome many members and many new faces and new folks to the call today. And we're here today to talk about how the Inflation Reduction Act can benefit your university. And it is with great pleasure that I introduce you to Courtney Kishbaugh, who is the Director of Innovation Projects at Greater Cleveland Partnership. There, Courtney works to connect federal funding opportunities and agency programs with the goals of organizations to support their sustainability planning and initiatives. Prior to this, she worked as a consultant supporting cities, metropolitan areas, and nonprofit clients in pursuit of inclusive and sustainable economic growth, including developing multi-year economic development plans for Greater St. Louis region and the state of Rhode Island. I had the joy of listening to Courtney present in Cleveland in December and really feel that she has a lot to offer, and I'm very excited to jump into that. I'd also like to acknowledge and thank 2 other SDSN colleagues on the line, Sonia Nev, who is a Program and Outreach Coordinator with SDSN USA and SDSN. And you all probably have heard much from her leading into this, and thank you, Sonia. And then also Elena Crete, who's the head of the Climate and Energy Program, spearheading the decarbonization pathways work of SDSN, and she also is joining us. And thank you both for your support coming in today. And with that, I will hand it over to you, Courtney, and thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. One more note, which is I ask that you put Q&A into the Q&A section, and we'll get to that at the end of Courtney's remarks.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Caroline, for a wonderful introduction. So as Caroline mentioned, my name is Courtney Kishbaugh. I work primarily on connecting federal funding opportunities with regional priorities in Cleveland. But then I met Caroline and Elena at the Decarbonization Summit that the city of Cleveland put on, and they mentioned that other universities besides local Cleveland ones could benefit from some of the information. And so I obviously said yes, and here we are today. So I'm going to talk through some of the different ways the Inflation Reduction Act can benefit your university. But first, we can quickly talk about the why. So universities, as we know, are leading institutions in our nation and in our communities, and the US cannot meet its decarbonization goals without universities, in part because of their own operations and emissions, but more importantly, because of their essential interdisciplinary research and the ways that they're developing the understanding and skills of our future leaders. Not to make anyone on this call feel old, but 2050 is closer than 1995. And so it's important to consider how old you'll be then, how old your students will be, your prospective students, and the world that they are going to be navigating at that time period. We owe it to the generation that's coming to take whatever actions we can to mitigate and adapt to the climate crisis. So I'm going to share my screen, and please write in the chat if you can't see it. So what is the Inflation Reduction Act? Let me know if you can see. I just moved to the next slide. Okay, perfect. So the Inflation Reduction Act authorizes $370 billion in federal funding. It's for domestic energy production, it's for energy efficiency, it's for some R&D, and then it's also for some environmental justice programs. If fully realized, it'll decrease US carbon emissions by 40% by 2030. So it's the most ambitious climate action the United States has ever taken. Most programs will run through EPA and Department of Energy, but some will also go through USDA, HUD, DOI, DOT, so it's Department of Interior, Department of Transportation, and Commerce. So if you have relationships with any of those entities and you want to pursue programs that they are putting forth through the Inflation Reduction Act, it's good to kind of tap into those connections and say, hey, we're interested, we're raising our hand, please put us on the mailing list or inform us when opportunities are going to drop that we can pursue. And so that's where programs are running through, but then there's also tax credits, which we'll get to in a moment, and those tax credits are run through Treasury. So what actually is the IRA? We just talked about how it's $370 billion, but what is it actually going to be used for? It's going to be used to clean up our grid, make electricity cheaper, make it more secure, and then help our built environments take advantage by electrifying them. And then finally, it's going to pursue community and environmental justice programming. And there are ways that you can take advantage of provisions in each of these areas. Something I would also like to mention is I think because we had such a productive legislative session these past 2 years in Congress, we hear billions and billions and billions being passed, and we kind of become desensitized to what $1 billion actually is. And so just to kind of set the table for that amount, 1,000,000 seconds is 12 days, 1,000,000,000 seconds is 32 years. So when I say that this money is transformational, it's huge. There's multiple pots, there's multiple shots on goal. Please just understand like the vast array of opportunities that are available to you and to your university. So as I mentioned, there's these myriad funding opportunities, and you can break them down into 2 buckets. So you can talk about guaranteed incentives and competitive funding, and each one requires a different approach. So guaranteed incentives, these are your tax credits. And again, I know a lot of universities are tax exempt entities. So in the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about what that means, since these are all tax credits on the left. And so because the tax credits are guaranteed incentives, what happens is they are guaranteed dollars if you meet the federal requirements. So you do projects that relate to these federal requirements, they're placed into service, and then after that project is placed into service, you can realize the monetary benefits from it. You are not competing with anybody else. You are guaranteed that money if you meet the requirements. And then there are a bunch of competitive funding opportunities. And so there's things here that would work for research and development, and then environmental justice that would affect your broader community. And so these programs have to be applied for at the agency level. It's a competitive process. I know universities are well versed in taking advantage of these dollars, but just to remind folks that competitive opportunities are not a C's get degrees kind of thing. It's if you meet the requirements, you very well might not get the dollars. It's an A's get considered kind of program. And because of these large dollar amounts, and because it's the greatest funding to date that the US has had on some of these programs, I anticipate them being highly competitive. So you're really going to have to put your best foot forward to access these dollars. But if you can, again, they're in the billions range, and it's really transformative for some of your work. So for guaranteed incentives, if you're a tax exempt entity, you're probably like, well, what's the purpose of a tax credit for me? The elegant part of the provisions within the IRA is that they allow nonprofits or other tax exempt entities to receive a direct pay option instead of a tax credit. So it basically functions as a refundable credit. And in most cases, you have the direct pay option for the tax credits we're about to discuss. There's one exception to that process, and that's the energy efficiency incentives for buildings, which you'll see as the second bullet. For that piece, the credit works as a cost deduction rather than a direct payment. So let's say you're building a new building on campus, or you're retrofitting an old one, and you want to meet certain energy efficiency requirements. What would happen is in your RFP or your contract with your architect or designer, you would have to negotiate you getting those benefits passed through to you, getting that deduction at the end. So that's just something to be aware of if you're pursuing built environment work. And then I know some folks had questions about whether direct pay is eligible for public universities, not just private ones. And it is in some cases. And then in one case, we aren't entirely sure. There was a certain type of public university known as an instrumentality that was absent from the eligibility list. And so that's a really good, if you fall into that category, I would definitely talk with your tax attorneys about that to see if you are eligible for some of these programs. So what kind of tax credits are available? So the investment tax credit doesn't just work for solar, but it's the easiest way for me to describe it. And so the investment tax credit, it's a base rate of 6%. So you install a solar array, and if you meet no other requirements with it, you'll get 6% of that cost back to you. If you use prevailing wage, so you're paying fair wages, which your contractor should be able to do, you meet that requirement. Instead, it's a 30% tax credit back. So it's basically you're getting a solar array for a 30% discount. There are a bunch of bonus tax credits available for domestic content requirements. So if the pieces of your solar array was produced in the United States, you can get a plus 10% bonus credit. If you're located in a low income community or an energy community, which is maybe an area that used to have coal or oil drilling, coal mining or oil drilling within it, you can get another plus 10%. So if you are able to stack some of these credits, you can get up to 60% of the cost of that system back to you in a refundable credit through direct pay. So it makes things incredibly affordable. It can take something that would have taken 14 years to pay for itself down to 4 to 6 years, depending on how much of the credit you're able to use. And then there's a certain point, if you own a lot of property, if your university owns a significant amount of land, a significant amount of buildings, there's a certain part where if you're installing a certain number of panels or clean energy systems, it's more lucrative for you to do a production tax credit instead, which is kind of done as a certain cents on the kilowatt that's generated, and your accounting team will be able to tell you at what point the production tax credit is better for you to go for instead of the investment tax credit, because you can't pursue both for the same project. If your university has commercial fleets, which I believe most universities do, there's a tax credit for you to switch over to electric vehicles. So you can get $7,500 for each low weight vehicle, so that's under 14,000 pounds. You can get up to $40,000 for heavier weight vehicles, so over 14,000 pounds. There's even a 15% credit for hybrid vehicles, but as your university starts to phase out old cars and redo its fleet, I would highly suggest looking at having the electric vehicle tax credit to help you shave down some of that cost. And simultaneously, while you're purchasing electric vehicles, you might want to be adding in refueling infrastructure, so chargers for those electric vehicles. You can get up to $100,000 or 30% of the cost per charger back to you in the direct pay option. So, and you can also have this qualify for 2 and 3 wheel vehicle charging. So if a lot of students on your campus use e-bikes or they use scooters, you can use this refueling tax credit infrastructure to help support those students as well. And another thing is, if you have already started to install chargers on your campus, this is a retroactive credit. So if you did so within the last year, if you did so in 2022, you can retroactively apply this credit. Something that I haven't mentioned so far, but one thing that's really helpful about the Inflation Reduction Act is many of the provisions in it are 10-year provisions. They're giving you market certainty. They're giving you something that you can plan towards. You know that the credit's going to be available if you want to pursue a project in 2024 or 2026. You know that it'll still be available to you. And then finally, there's the energy efficiency credits, so for commercial buildings. So this was a previously existing deduction, and it used to be $1.88 per square foot that you would get if you pursued energy efficiency upgrades, but now it takes you from a minimum of $2.50 per square foot up to $5 per square foot. So it's a huge increase. And this is for qualifying improvements if you're increasing the insulation on a building, if you're putting in a new HVAC system, if you're putting in LED lighting or a skylight. Please look into this commercial buildings tax credit. There's a sliding scale that you'll have to meet in order to fully take advantage of it. So at minimum, by doing these updates, you have to save 25% annual energy savings. And then a full deduction is available if you have 50% annual energy savings. And I believe that those savings are from software modeling. So whoever your engineering firm is should be able to help you with that. And then I would be remiss not to put in this individual households benefit, just because you or some university employees are likely to be able to take advantage of it. So depending on what income is, the household income, you can get anywhere between you can get anywhere between 80% or 50% to 100% of certain upgrades paid for, or if you're a higher income household, you can get up to a 30% tax credit deduction. And this is for if you're, if like a home of like professors or faculty or staff, if they want to install a heat pump water heater, or they want to do some weatherization with windows, or if they want to get rooftop solar, these credits are available to them as well. So it's something that you might want to be able to share with your staff. And then we can move into competitive opportunities. So I'm just showing you some selected opportunities. This is by no means the whole gamut. When you are looking at R&D opportunities, I'd be paying significant attention to Department of Energy. That's where the vast majority of this stuff is going to come through. But if your faculty, again, like they're most likely on top of this, it's universities understand how to pursue federal funding because they do it all the time with NSF and with DOE and with other partners for research and NIH. But it's a deluge of funding on levels that are, again, unprecedented. So if you have faculty who are involved in clean energy research, there's a ton of stuff they should be on the lookout for. Again, not extensive, but just some examples: hydrogen and fuel cell technologies, alternative fuels for aviation to make aviation more sustainable, and then next generation materials and manufacturing as well. All of these have multiple $1 million associated with them. Some of these programs are granted out on multiple year periods, so you will have multiple shots on goal for these. And then there's community-based appropriations. Oh, actually, one more thing. Let me just get to this. So while IRA has a significant number of these R&D pieces associated, I would also be remiss not to mention that you should be looking at IIJA, so the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, and then CHIPS as well. A lot of the funding through that will likely have a climate related lens to it. And we even saw this with Build Back Better funding. A lot of the folks who ended up being funded and had either university led or involved projects talked about climate tech adaptation or mitigation technologies. So just wanted to mention that the world of R&D and the plus ups that are available aren't just an IRA, it's also an IIJ and CHIPS. And so hopefully your faculty, or if you have offices that are doing coordination for departments, are paying attention to those opportunities as well. And then if we get into community-based grant appropriations, so universities as anchor institutions, as we all know, they have an integral role in fostering local community development, and they're really well suited to set a table and engage with local stakeholders on a variety of issues of shared value for all stakeholders involved, because they're place-based, mission-driven places, organizations. So some of these community-based grants, I could see local folks probably contacting your universities to see if they want to participate. There's everything from pollution reduction, which this might sound wild, but there's a lot of orphaned methane wells. Even within the city of Cleveland, we have one that was located in a nursing home that had to be plugged. And so projects like that could qualify for this Climate Pollution Reduction Act. There's neighborhood access and equity grants, so places that have had divides from highways and redlining and segregation can get reconnected through this grant that pursues environmental justice at the same time. The EPA just announced $30 million for community-based organizations and $70 million for state and local governments to pursue environmental justice initiatives. I guarantee you your universities are going to be asked to help lead these. I know a lot of urban centers in particular are looking to increase their urban forestry programs and their tree cover. And since universities own large swaths of land and real estate and property, I could see universities being brought in to help with those efforts. And then there's just one last additional provision that I wanted to talk through, and that's this Department of Energy Loan Program Office. And so the LPO has a cumulative loan authority of $350 billion, so almost as much as the entire Inflation Reduction itself, this program office has to lend out for deeply innovative clean energy projects, everything from utility scale solar, wind, geothermal to electric vehicle production. So for example, like Tesla got 450 million from this loan program office to start commercializing their vehicles and pursuing manufacturing of them. And so, I mean, maybe you have some alums who could benefit from this program, or maybe your university itself could benefit. So the one example I have of university involvement is the Record Hill Wind Project, and Yale University's endowment co-underwrote this program with the loan program office to get utility scale wind energy in Massachusetts. And so most of these programs, you don't necessarily know who the partners are, and so I can't tell you the financial details of whether that's been successful for Yale or not, that program, but I do know that Record Hill Wind is running today, and it's produced 96,000 megawatts of energy so far, of clean wind energy. And so again, I'm not a finance professional, and I'm not giving you advice on how to run your endowment. I'm just trying to give you an example of how universities have been involved in this particular program before. And so some key takeaways from all of this. So when we're talking about the guaranteed incentives, truly don't underestimate the power of them. Again, it's guaranteed money if you meet the requirements. And so you should look at those incentives, link them up to your organization's upcoming construction plans, and then start to look if there's any areas in which you can plus up your plans that might help push you over to a higher threshold of getting more credits. So for example, if you're doing those building envelope projects and you're going to hit 25% energy efficiency, can you also at the same time install a skylight or work on replacing with LED bulbs to help you hit that 50% mark and help you get double the amount of tax credit back to you? So just consider that with your upcoming construction projects. I refer to these folks listed in the second bullet on the left as your Avengers team. So you need to involve your facilities folks, your finance folks, your operations, your legal, early and often in this process to see what's possible and what you can be aiming towards. And paying attention to IRS regulations as they come is really, really important. Not least of all just for the eligibility list if you're an instrumentality. And then another piece is determining if the existing contractors that your university works with have the capacity to deliver their projects to the specifications of RFPs that will allow you to access these tax credits. If your current contractors don't have that ability, which I'm sure most do, but you might have to search and see, okay, well, we have to subcontract in a certain area. Well, we have to pursue new potential contractors in order to get that done. For R&D funding opportunities for climate-related and IRA-related provisions, while your departments and your faculty, I'm sure are so on top of it. I know because every time I reach out to Case Western, which is our local big engineering school opportunities, they've already started to talk internally about it. But it can really help for you to just double check, confirm if anybody in your university has the capability to pursue, and then assisting in coordinating applications in case there's multiple applications going in for the same grant. In many cases that won't hurt you, but in some cases it can. In some cases, the feds like really want to see one coordinated regional application, especially for something like the hydrogen hubs. So it doesn't hurt to help and try and take that role. I would say it's important to leverage your commercial partnerships existing, and then if you've got any Fortune 500s around you, if you've got any significant R&D facilities, and you have relationships with them, I would leverage those for those R&D funding opportunities. Many of those opportunities will require, or they'll be more competitive with company involvement. And you'll know by reading the specs of the grants, but if you're starting to plan a project by the time the specs of a grant have come out, you're a little bit behind the ball. You need to start forming those relationships now and making sure you have a plan when the notice of intent goes out. That way, when the actual funding opportunity announcement comes out, you're just executing at that point to the specs of the grant. And then because some of these places, some some of these organizations, especially on the commercial side, they might not have federal navigation expertise. They don't know what it takes to put in a good DOE grant. They don't know what it takes to put in a good NSF grant. It is really advantageous to have universities lead when possible. Like there's a reason universities have whole offices and indirect costs that support grant applications. They can be high barrier to entry applications, and universities have shops within them that know how to pursue these effectively. So you can be a leader, you can be a convener for those R&D opportunities. And then finally, for the community funding opportunities, you will likely be pulled into discussions with your city and county government or other local community-based organizations. Again, like you can help with leveraging your federal application expertise to make those stronger. And then many regions, I will say, suffer similar challenges. Like Cleveland is, as much as I love it, it has challenges that are very similar to a Detroit. It has challenges that are very similar to a Buffalo or a Pittsburgh. And leading with your place's challenges are not going to be enough to get you in a competitive place for these grants. Something that can set you apart are innovative partnership models. So the way that your university chooses to engage with your community-based organizations, with your local government, it can be a differentiator, and it can make your region a lot more competitive for some of these dollars. So I know I just spit a ton out at everybody, but I'm happy to take the questions that I can. I think before we go to questions, though, I just want to say I would never, I know this is a lot. I know this is so much because you have the guaranteed incentives, you have the competitive opportunities. Within the competitive opportunities, there's levels to it. I understand, but I just would like to say, like, don't discredit how your individual institution and your institution's actions can actually make a huge difference on climate. I'd say folks aren't necessarily spurred into action when they see smoke from a fire. They're spurred into action when they see other people grabbing a bucket and running towards it to help put it out. Universities have the ability to lead on this, and I'd argue that if you're in this room, you can make a large difference. So with that, I will turn to Q&A.
Thank you, Courtney. That was a huge amount of information, and we have a lot of Q&A coming in. We've gotten a lot of questions on whether you'll be willing to share your slides. So I think that's the first thing I will ask you as we start off.
Yep, I'm more than happy to share the slides.
Right. From there, I don't know if you have access to the Q&A. I can read them out to you to start, but if you'd rather go through, you're welcome to. But so the first question that came in is for the energy communities. What did the cutoff year shake out to?
So that I don't know the answer off the top of my head. I can do some digging and check. For the 7,500 EV credit, I'm pretty sure that that's for real vehicles only. So unfortunately, I don't think that would count. I see someone had asked about the refueling infrastructure tax credit, and since it was expanded retroactively, this applies both to infrastructure already in place as well as EV chargers that have yet to be installed. Yes, it applies to infrastructure that was installed in 2022 onwards through 2032. So if you installed something in 2020 or 2021, I don't believe it qualifies, unfortunately. But if you did it in 2022, it should. Are there match requirements for competitive grant opportunities? For many of them, yes, there are, which is why, again, it can be important to have good relationships with the commercial entities in your area, because they might be able to provide some of that matching funding. That matching funding, I've seen a usual threshold that I've seen is 20%, but I've also been involved in grant applications where it's been beneficial to exceed that amount, and it's been looked on favorably by funders. And so what is the definition of commercial buildings? Does it include dorms, lab buildings, and sporting arenas? So it would include lab buildings. Dorms, I'm really not sure about. I tried to deep dive into that before this call because I knew we were going to get some questions on dorms. And I just, and there's a lot written on multifamily properties, but I don't know if student housing, if they would consider that a multifamily property. And so I'm not sure. I wish I had a better answer for you. And then for sporting arenas, I don't necessarily see why not. It's a commercial building. But again, that might just be something to parse through in the IRS regulations and double check. Then I see many research universities use cogeneration plants. A big focus has been on clean electricity, but what funding is available for industrial scale heat pumps? Okay, this is a great question, and this is something that I was researching last night, and there are some complications to it, but Baker Tilly has a really good slide specifically on combined electrical and heating production. I'll see if I can find that from one of their webinars and get it out to folks, because I know that's how a lot of universities run their heating. So Michelle, thank you for bringing that up. And then, is there any credit for CNG vehicles? I'm assuming that means a natural gas vehicle. And so the only credits that I know of for vehicles are for electric vehicles or for hybrids. I don't know of anything else. There could be, but I haven't seen it.
We do have one more question that came through the chat, which is how many of these opportunities are already on the streets in the sense that there is an application procedure already in place?
Sure. So that's a mixed question. Some of these competitive funding opportunities have definitely already dropped. Like a lot of notice of intents went out in the fall. A lot of funding opportunities have been dropped in December and January. We're going to see a lot of applications available through the summer and then second rounds for many of them in the fall. So competitive opportunities are going right now. And then for tax credits, they are available starting, or they were available starting January 1st, 2023. So tax credits are live too. The IRS has been publishing regulations on and guidance on how to pursue that. But the tax credits themselves are available. And I'd mentioned this before, but just to say it again, you can access the tax credit once your project has been placed into service. So whatever year it was placed into service, if you started construction this year, but the building didn't become operational until 2024, that's when you would apply for the tax credit, even though the tax credit opened January 1st of this year.
I did see Dano put a note in the chat that whether or not a building is commercial might be related to how the utility classifies it. So thank you for that. If anyone has additional questions, feel free to raise your hand. We can also let you speak a question if it's complicated to type it, or feel free to put any other thoughts in the chat or in the Q&A, sorry.
Best places to get more information about these programs. So I would say the best place is if your university contracts with tax attorneys today, because they're already tasked with finding these opportunities for you. That's where I would go first. But there's also there's NACUBO, which is which happens to talk through a lot of the tax incentives. And then if you are interested in pursuing the competitive opportunities, the best place to get information about those is, again, if you already have relationships with some of these offices. If you already have relationships with Department of Energy, I would talk to your contacts there. Then the next best thing is to get on the email lists of these agencies. And then the third best thing is to check grants.gov or the Energy Exchange frequently to see when things are going to be posted. So those are the best places. To be more competitive, should multiple universities across multiple cities jointly submit? That will be really dependent on the competitive opportunity. For example, this isn't funded through the Inflation Reduction Act, but This was funded through the CHIPS Act. There's regional technology hubs grant coming out, and you might want to pursue climate tech through those grants. And for those, multiple universities can partner on it. So it's just really, you have to read the specs of the grant, attend the webinars that the agencies are putting on, and you'll figure out whether it's better for multiple universities to be involved in something versus not. For some of these projects, like it's again, just like a couple PIs, one PI, and it might just be advantageous for you to go it alone. Are there any benefits or credits for retiring existing fossil fuel infrastructure early, or the benefits more geared towards new construction? I haven't seen anything for retiring infrastructure early. That doesn't mean that it's not there. It just means I haven't seen it. From what I've seen, a lot of the benefits are for either new construction or for retrofitting. Okay, anything else today? Did I get away with enough?
A lot to process, I think, and I think we'll have probably some more questions trickling in as people have time to digest it all. One question did come up about whether or not SDSN is coordinating any submissions, and we are not at this time. But if there's something you specifically think would be beneficial to engage the network with, please feel free to reach out. The slides and recording will be shared via email, and then we'll also put the recording on our YouTube channel if Courtney confirms that we can do that.
Yes, that's fine.
I do see one more question in the chat, which is if you can elaborate on the wage requirements.
Yep, so it's certain prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements. It's honestly probably easier just to send the text of it, but we can do that.
Okay, raise your hand now or forever hold your peace. Otherwise, I just thank you so much, Courtney, for all of this information and for taking the time to talk with us today. Really appreciate it, and look forward to hopefully continuing the conversation and hopefully hearing from many people on the line that you've had success in pursuing these opportunities. Have a great day, everyone.
Great. Thank you all.
Great.
Yeah. Okay, are we all set, Sonia?
I think so. Thanks, Courtney. I think I'm gonna ask you about the helpful resources you also found, and I'd love to send that to folks who joined, if that's okay.
Oh,
You
yeah,
mentioned
of
some
course.
links, and I think people would be interested in receiving those.
Oh, yep, definitely.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I think it was super well received. Thanks to everyone who's still on the line for joining, and have a great rest of the day.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.